Now, in this bend of the literary essay unit, we're going to start by talking about some of the differences that we're going to see when we write our essay. Now, we're going to start today with the introduction. Right. Let's review first what we already know about the structure of the introduction of an essay. What is the very first thing that you're going to want to do? Oliver? Hook the reader, okay? And we've learned lots of different ways that we can hook the reader. We've learned, give me one. Let me choose somebody different. Adrian?
Rhetorical question.
A rhetorical question, and please try to remember not to answer a rhetorical question. What's another one you can do? Think about it. If you think about it, raise your hand. Yuchin? A quote from the story. Aiden?
Like a little mini story?
Well, like sort of like a scenario.
Yes.
Like a scenario. Okay, creating a scenario. And we see that a lot when someone says, picture this or imagine this. Sawyer?
A global fact.
A global fact, a global statement, okay? And you have that chart in your binder that gives you all the different kinds of hooks. And some of you might notice when you looked at your graded essay from Bottled Water, some of you kind of are still struggling a little bit with that, with remembering to do it, number one, but also with challenging yourself to move away from just that rhetorical question and move into a more complicated type of a hook. And for the literary essay, we're going to use a quote. And we're going to want to use a quote from the book that really kind of represents the book. Have you ever noticed when you're reading something, sometimes a statement will stand out to you, like it almost by itself, just the way it's written and just the way it sounds, it seems super, super important. Okay, so in my book that I'm going to write my literary essay on, which is called More Than Anything Else by Marie Bradby, I chose a couple, or I thought about a couple of different quotes that I might like to use. The first one comes early in the book, and it says that that he is he's not hungry for a meal. It says, but it isn't really a meal I want. Okay, that was one quote that I thought about. And then just on the next page it said, more than anything else, I want to learn to read. Okay, it just sounds like an important sentence. It seems to represent the book. It even includes the title. But then when I got a little bit further into the book, I happened to notice that by the time he gets home at the end of the day, his I want to learn to read turns into I have to learn to read. When he talks to his mother, Mama, I have to learn to read, I say. And so I think I want to choose that one because for me that is the strongest. Now, you're welcome to copy my sample in your notebook so that you have it to look at. Now remember, when we're quoting the text, we have to put it in quotation marks. So it says, Mama, I have to learn to read. And I'm just going to skip lines in my notebook, just because if I change my mind and I want to change any of the wording, I want to have room. I want to have room. So notice that I indented. And then I wrote my quote, Mama, I have to learn to read. Now, my reader is going to really need me to place this in context for them. They're going to have to really understand. And how long is my hook supposed to be? How long is the hook? Who can remember from the checklist? How long is the hook supposed to be? Mariah? Alexander? 2 to 3 sentences. We don't want it too long that the hook becomes almost like a story within itself, okay? But we don't want it so short that the reader doesn't really even know what we're talking about. So in addition to my quote, I want to add and explain to it. So I'm going to say something like this. This quote from, and I'm going to identify the book. Now, when you're writing, remember that the title of a book is capitalized. The words are capitalized. And guys, the smaller words are not, but if you're ever in doubt, look directly at the book and see how it was spelled on the front of the book. Okay? Also, it gets underlined. This quote from More Than Anything Else, and then I'm going to also include the author. So think about the elements that I'm including in my introduction. A quote, and I'm identifying the title and the author because perhaps after reading my essay, the reader wants to go and find that book and read it themselves. And this way they can find it. And it's by Marie Bradby. And guys, again, if you're in doubt as to how to spell the person's name, look it up. Get the book, look at the name, or get on the computer, go to a site like Amazon, and find out how to spell the person's name. Okay, those little attention to detail are going to be really important to follow. Jalen? No, that's a good question. Just the title of the book, the author's name does not get underlined. Okay, so I said, this quote from More Than Anything Else by Marie Bradby reveals that the main character, and remember his name was Booker, and notice what I do. Main character, comma, I'm going to identify him, Booker, comma, and even though this book was written in the first person, where he says I all the time, it was a first person book, even though it says that at the very end we know what his name is. How do we discover what his name is, Terry?
You discover it because the guy who's helping him learn to read asks what his name is, and he says Booker.
Okay, so he says Booker out loud and then he writes it in the sand, right? So you know, in the dirt. And so the newspaper man asks him what his name is. And remember, the newspaper man is the person who's going to teach him how to read. And he writes and he shows him how to write his name in the dirt. Okay, so the main character, Booker, is determined to achieve his dream. And you can see, because I want to say this is my statement, that's why I chose that quote. Because to say I want to learn to read, I have to learn to read, just that one difference in that word makes that such a stronger statement, and it is a better choice for me for my essay. Okay, can everybody see that? Now, I chose several, and then from those choices, I picked that one. Okay, now, I've hooked my reader with a quote, and I've kind of provided a little bit of context. So the reader has a little bit of an idea. Now I want to start stating my claims. Okay, and remember, my thesis is about Booker being determined. Okay, and determined is a character trait. All right, and when you work today, I will be passing out the character trait chart for you to have to reference. But determined is a character trait. Now, my claims, my main ideas that I want to use to support that have to show that he is determined. Okay, and so the first one on my planning sheet says Booker does not let obstacles stand in his way. And remember, this would be on my planning sheet in one of my boxes, my 3 boxes, written in a complete sentence. And I happened to see that in all of the essays I read this weekend. I really and truly saw that. Some of you are still not writing a sentence in that box. And what's happening is you don't have a sentence in your introduction. And you don't have a sentence in your body paragraphs. So get into the habit of doing that. Make sure that you make a sentence. Okay, so now I'm going to look at my second box, Adrian. And I'm not going to say Booker again, just because I've already said it a couple of times. And I'm just going to replace that with the pronoun he. He does not give up. Even when it seems impossible. Now that's the sentence that's in my second box on my planning sheet. Remember, if I have really and truly put the time and effort into my planning sheet, writing the essay itself is easy. It's just following the structure. And then finally, the third box on my planning sheet says he is willing to work hard. And then I'm going to go ahead and restate my thesis. Booker is determined to achieve his goal. And notice I changed it a little bit from earlier in the introduction, just to kind of give it a little bit of a variety. His dream and his goal are the same. Okay, so a couple of things I want you to notice. Let me just scooch out and make this a little bit smaller. This is one paragraph. It's indented, and the sentences continue. I do not start a new line just because I start a new sentence. Notice here, the sentence ends. Sophia, can you see that? The period is here, and then the next sentence goes here. I'm looking down at your paper, and I can see that you started a new sentence. I just want you to be clear that this is one whole paragraph. It is all together. Okay. In my notebook, I wrote it skipping lines, just so that if I want to go back and change anything, I can change it easily. I use these empty lines in order to make changes. When I go to publish, I will publish my essay without those skipped lines. But right now, this is a draft, and so I want to have it available for me to make changes, because that's what writers do. Writers revise, they change their words, they correct them, they choose better words. Okay, so before I send you off, I want to read the whole introduction. I want you to listen to the parts that we talked about that your introduction needs to have, beginning with a quote, providing a context for that quote for your reader. So your 2 to 3 sentences of your hook is your quote and the context for your quote. Then you have you've made sure that you have mentioned the title and the author of the book. And then you have presented your 3 main ideas. What is in your boxes? No details yet, just what's in your boxes. And then finally, you end by stating your thesis. All right, can everybody see that? All right, so today what you're going to do when you go back to your seat is you're going to write your introduction in your notebook. Write your introduction in your notebook, doing just what I did here. Skip lines. This is a draft. And you can follow this basic structure. Use anything in your binders that you have. And as you start to work, I will be passing out a sheet for character traits. Adrian, could I get you to sit down on your bottom, please? Thank you. Question, Sawyer? If you finish your introduction, please go back and reread it and make sure it's the best introduction that you can make. And then you can go ahead and either go to your choice board or read a book. Okay? I'm going to ask you not to go to the Rubik's Cubes just because it makes a little bit of noise. cannot because it needs to be quiet. Adrian, question?
If you're doing something, the introduction about the book from the quote, if you don't know the exact quote from the book, are you allowed to look?
You are, but I will tell you that I only have one copy of Fox. I may have a second copy. I will go and take a look to see if I do. And I still have all of the books. I did move them to the side counter. All of the books that you used and you read and you made character maps, those are all in the side counter. You can get one of those. But we have to be fair and kind about books and sharing books with other people. If you can't get to your book, if you can't get to it to find your quote, leave space in your notebook for where you're going to put that and write the rest of your introduction, and maybe the book will be available to you at that point. Okay? Any other questions before you go back to your seats, Jalen? Yes, you're only focusing on one character. Only focusing on one character and making a statement about that character, a statement that has to do with a character trait, how you would describe them. Anthony. You have to do a quote from the book. This is a literary essay and you have to do a quote from the book. Any other questions? Okay, go ahead and return to your seats.